In the worst timing in the world ever, a lorry has just turned up outside to dig up the road outside my house. So I apologise if we get any extraneous noise from that. It's been quiet all day, but they've just turned up right at this moment. So to thank you all for staying to the last talk of the day. My talk this afternoon is just to give you some feedback on the consultation that we've been doing on the NBN Trust strategy for 2021 to 2025, and to talk about the next steps of how we're going to progress the strategy from here on in. So in terms of how we've developed this strategy, we had 2 consultations at the beginning of 2020 that some of you may remember, and these were just to determine the strategic aims and objectives of the network as a whole, to try and ensure that the NBN Trust strategy was going to be dovetailing with those and reflecting what were thought to be the important opportunities and challenges for the entire network going forward. And then we have drafted a strategy document and high-level activity plan, which were done mainly through input from the NBN Trust Board and Secretariat team initially, and informed by the consultations that we had at the beginning of the year, and also the knowledge of the network that we've had from working with the network over a varying number of years. And the draft documents were put out for consultation in September and October. And one of the main difference probably for this strategy that we've got going forward, as opposed to the current strategy, is that it's a strategy for the NBN Trust rather than a strategy for the NBN network as a whole. And on during the consultation, we got an overwhelming support for the fact that doing a strategy for the trust was the right way forward. Obviously, any strategy for all the trusts cannot only be delivered with the input and engagement and collaboration for the network. There's very little that we can do in there on our own. But the reasons behind having the strategy for the trust and not the network as a whole was so that the trust could have ownership of it, we could be held more accountable for it, and these are activities that we think we can really drive forward for the network as a whole in the future. So for our consultation process that we did in September and October, I did meetings with 23 key stakeholders, and they're shown in the box on the right there. And we also did an online survey. So we sent out the strategy documents and the link to the survey to all of our members, which is 215 members. We sent them out to 36 other interested parties. So these were things like people like universities whose students used the NBN Atlas a lot for their projects, to people like Tony Juniper, to people from NERC and the UK stakeholders for GBIF, and various other people who aren't members of the NBN, but we thought they'd be interested in the strategy and might want to comment on it going forward. And we also had a pop-up on the NBN Atlas for about 3 weeks, where if you went on the NBN Atlas, it would pop up and direct you to the documents and to the online survey. So we were hoping that we would get as wide a consultation as we possibly could. You know, we've invited everybody possible to respond to it. So it was a little bit, and we also followed up with all the emails that we sent out to the members and to the other interested parties. We followed up with follow-up emails. We also did quite a bit of social media about it, and we included it in network news. But unfortunately, we only got 30 responses to the online survey, which was a little bit disappointing. But we feel that by having the 23 key stakeholder meetings, that we've got a really good in-depth understanding of what the network thought of the draft strategy. And it was just that, it was just the first draft strategy, nothing was set in stone, and we really were wanting to get people's true thoughts and opinions on it. So with the key stakeholder meetings, we tried to ask roughly the same questions as were on the survey a lot of the time. And where possible, we've quantified the responses, though it doesn't always add up to the 23 meetings that we had. We were able to go into a lot more depth during the key stakeholder meetings, obviously, and ask follow-up questions, which we weren't able to do on the online survey. Although sometimes we did get a bit sidetracked and didn't answer all of the questions, which is, again, why it might not add up to 23 people responding to, or 23 organisations responding to each question. So we started off asking people what they thought of the vision and mission that we'd proposed for the trust for the next 5 years. And these are both given on the slide. I'm not going to read them out here. And on the whole, for both the vision and the mission, the vast majority of people either agreed or agreed strongly with the vision and mission statements. However, when we got into the discussions in the key stakeholder meetings and in some of the comments that came through on the online survey, although people agreed with the mission, they felt that it was a little bit, that it could do with being stronger, and that we would maybe be better off with a sort of shorter, punchier strapline type vision rather than the one we've got. So we are going to be looking into changing that and having a stronger vision than we've got there. And similarly with the mission, vast majority of people again agreed or agreed strongly with it, but felt that we could also strengthen it by adding in something about the leadership that the NBN Trust could show, and or championing data use being in the mission as well. So it's not only that we bring together all those who generate and curate the data and use the data, but we bring the data itself together and we promote that use. So again, we're going to be looking at revising the mission along those lines. The next question on the online survey was, does the description of the trust role clarify the scope of the strategy? And again, in both the survey responses and the stakeholder meetings, the vast majority of people thought that yes, it did. And some of the key quotes that came out of the meetings were that the facilitate, coordinate and support the network is a key point, and that is where the real value of the NBN Trust lies, and that maybe we should bring that out a little bit more, as we should do with the leadership and championing role. And make that much clearer in our description of our role. It was said we've been a little bit timid in some of the language that we use, and we could maybe be a bit stronger in that. And that we should also highlight the fact that we are wanting to do advocacy for the network and for the use of data, and bring that out a bit more in the role as well. In the strategy document, we detailed 4 strategic objectives, which were to enhance the accessibility and usability of the UK's wildlife data, to empower providers and consumers of wildlife data through engagement and collaboration at the regional, national and global levels, to communicate the value of wildlife data for use in decision making and research, and to inspire a wonder in nature, and to develop the strength and sustainability of the NBN Trust. And so that we asked in the survey and in the meetings as to how well do these objectives capture the main directions you like to see the trust going in. And again, we had a very positive response. It was felt that these strategic objectives did show that the trust was going in the direction that the network would like. It was all extremely positive, and as I say, from both the stakeholder meetings and from the survey, that we are heading in the right direction. And under each of the 4 objectives, we had a number of key activities which were proposed for the first year. So the activities that we put out in the high-level activity plan were just for year 1. The intention is that throughout this 5-year strategy, we will have a 12-monthly plan of each of the activities each year, rather than having a 5-year plan of all the activities that we're going to do. And that's partly because the world is ever changing at the moment. We don't really know, the current situation with COVID is making everything quite uncertain, but also because it enables us to be a much more dynamic organisation, and we can move with the times and with changing technologies and things like that. So again, for the activities, the vast majority of people that responded on the survey agreed or agreed strongly that these activities would enable the trust to deliver on our strategic objectives. And in the stakeholder meetings, it was also seen very positive that most of the activities that we'd suggested were the sort of things that people would like to see us do. I've not got time here to go through all of the activities, and as I said, most people thought that most of the activities were the right sort of thing. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things that it was thought we shouldn't be doing, or that people were less keen on, because this is one of the questions that we asked in the survey, and again one of the questions that we asked in the stakeholder meetings. And there was only really 2 of these that had any sort of real level of not necessarily disagreement with, but slight concern over. And the first of those was the investigating the use of AI for verification. And most people who weren't sure about this thought that it was we should broaden this out, and it'd be really good to have an activity to look at innovation and best practice around verification, but that we shouldn't concentrate solely on AI, but that AI could form a part of that activity and discussion. And there were a number of people who were very excited about the thought of us looking more into AI for verification, and this was one of the new and exciting things that would be coming out of the strategy. So it will still be in there as part of it, but it wouldn't be the full activity on its own. And the second one that caused a lot of discussion and a little bit of concern was the investigating the potential for a direct online submission route to the NBN Atlas. And this was thought to be considered, it could be a duplication of effort. There's already so many routes for submitting data at the moment. Is adding another one a good thing to do? And there are also some concerns about the verification and validation of records submitted this way. How would we be able to assure the quality or make it so that there was known quality data coming through? And it was suggested that it might be better to focus our efforts on improving the current submission routes, in particular iRecord, rather than setting up yet another route. And there's also concerns over the resources required and the costs to the trust of implementing something like this. So again, we're just going to widen this this activity out to look at data flows more generally and how they can be improved, rather than looking specifically at a direct submission route, although that may form part of it. Another thing we asked in the surveys and the meetings was, is there anything missing from the activities that we've proposed or from the strategy? And the main thing that came out of there was the other types of data. There was a very strong indication that the Trust should be incorporating habitat data and DNA into our plans, and that we should be whether this is bringing them directly into the NBN Atlas or just making sure that it's interoperable with the species data on the NBN Atlas is still stuff to be discussed. But it was a very clear indication from the vast majority of people that we need to be thinking more about those types of data rather than just species data. There was also mentioned that we haven't got a specific activity about promotion and implementation of common standards around data that we have on the NBN Atlas, and also that's collected by many of our members, and that we should include an activity around this, and that we should be doing more on improving metadata, so making the data that we've got already more usable. And finally, the other thing that was thought to be missing was that we could do something around explaining the appropriateness of different types of data for different users. So there's a lot of data that of different quality on the NBN Atlas, and some of that data will be useful for some analyses and users, and some of it won't. And it's just sort of doing more to explain what the data on the NBN Atlas can be used for, and also what the data that's collected by the network can be used for as well, to give people that helping hand there. The final couple of questions that we had on the strategy, on the survey, were how well do you think the strategy will benefit the network as a whole? And again, we had very positive result from this. Most people thought it would benefit the network very well. And we also got about 75% of respondents saying that this strategy would enable the NBN Trust to better support their organisation or themselves. Of the 25% that said no, there were some that said we wanted to put maybe, but we'll have to see how it plays out. And another said that it had no influence on their day-to-day influence on their organisation, and so they didn't feel they could put yes. But they thought that the strategy as a whole was pretty good. And we also did have the comment that groups and societies weren't explicitly mentioned in the strategy, and that is an oversight that we do need to address in the next revision. So overall, we got a very positive response to the strategy, which is really good, showing that the direction of travel that the Trust is heading in is the direction that the network would like to see us going in. And so there was a general agreement that we could be bolder and more ambitious in the language that we use in the strategy, using a bit more of the terminology around leadership and championing and advocacy. So the next steps are that the strategic framework document will be revised, and we will include much more of this sort of bolder, more ambitious language. We will be revising the high-level activity plan for year one. In that, we will be putting in more detail for the different activities. It was deliberately low on detail the first time round because we were just getting these initial responses to it, but for the next one we will put more detail in the sort of things we're hoping for, and also to include some of those missing elements that were highlighted before. Although we do have to be aware that the activity plan is just for 12 months, so we have to make sure that it's something that we think we can deliver. A number of the activities, I should also say, delivery of all the activities will be dependent upon the resources that we have. So we won't be able to deliver everything that we put in the activity plan without bringing in greater amount of funding and resources to enable us to do it. But we're going to, in the next iteration of the strategy, sort of split the activities out into things that are consolidation of what we already do, things that are development, and then things that are innovative that we would like to do if we get the funding, if we get the funding to be able to do that. And hopefully we're going to have the revised drafts of these documents ready to circulate by Christmas, and at which time we will send them out again for people to have a look at, but we're not going to do the full consultation that we did with the first drafts, but we will obviously be interested in people's comments and suggestions on the second iteration of those documents. And then hopefully we intend to have the final draft ready for the board to sign off in February for the strategy to be launched in April next year. So thank you for listening. And if you want to look at the strategy documents again, the link on where you can find them is there. If you have any comments, if you didn't get a chance to comment on it previously and you'd like to do so, please drop me a line, or if you want to have a chat about it, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about the strategy documents and the next steps. Thank you very much.